the 14th of September 1942. Somewhere in the North Atlantic, 200 metres beneath a slate-grey sea, the crew of U-756 are dying by degrees, not from enemy fire, not from a depth charge, from silence. The diesels are cold, the batteries are failing, and the ballast tank blow valve, the one mechanism that stands between 63 men and the crushing dark, will not open. A 3-inch steel bolt, installed 6 weeks earlier in a British dockyard and captured when the submarine was taken, has been machined to a tolerance of less than half a millimetre. It fits perfectly into the valve housing, and it does absolutely nothing else. The valve is locked. The boat cannot surface. This is not an accident. This is not sabotage in the traditional sense. This is the result of a deliberate, methodical, and almost entirely forgotten British programme to turn German engineering precision against itself, to use the enemy's obsession with standardised parts, interchangeable fittings, and meticulous tolerances as the weapon of their undoing. The men who designed this programme never fired a shot. They worked in a converted office in London with slide rules and technical manuals, and they may have done more quiet damage to the Kriegsmarine than any destroyer flotilla in the Royal Navy. To understand how a bolt, could immobilise a submarine, you first need to understand the world that made such a weapon not just possible, but necessary. By the autumn of 1942, the Battle of the Atlantic had reached a crisis point that the British public was not permitted to fully comprehend. Churchill would later write that the only thing that truly frightened him during the entire war was the U-boat peril. This was not rhetoric. In the first 9 months of 1942 alone, German submarines sank over 4 million tons of Allied shipping. To put that in terms that resist abstraction, that is roughly 650 merchant vessels, each one carrying food, fuel, ammunition, and the mechanical sinew of a war that Britain could not fight without imports. The country was an island. It needed those ships. The standard Allied response to the U-boat threat followed predictable lines. Build more convoy escorts, deploy aircraft with longer range, develop better ASTIC, the underwater detection technology the Americans called sonar, crack the Enigma codes. All of these efforts were underway simultaneously, and all of them were producing results, but none of them were producing results fast enough. In the autumn of 1942, Dönitz was commissioning new U-boats faster than the Allies were sinking them. The arithmetic was brutal and simple. What the standard response could not easily address was the supply chain that kept the U-boats operational. A submarine that sinks is a problem. A submarine that cannot leave port is a different kind of problem entirely. Quieter, cheaper to create, and far more difficult to attribute. German naval doctrine relied on a philosophy of interchangeability that was, in peacetime, an enormous industrial strength. Every U-boat of the same class used the same fittings, the same valves, the same bolts, the same pipe couplings. Parts manufactured in Hamburg could be installed in Brest. Parts manufactured in Kiel could be fitted in Lorient. The system was elegant, rational, and, it turned out, catastrophically vulnerable. The question a small group of British engineers asked themselves in the winter of 1941 was deceptively simple. What if the parts were right but wrong? The programme that emerged from this question was administered under the auspices of the Special Operations Executive's Industrial Sabotage Division, working in close collaboration with the Admiralty's Technical Intelligence Branch, and a group of civilian engineers drawn largely from the precision manufacturing industries of the English Midlands. The facility responsible for much of the practical work was located in a requisitioned engineering works outside Coventry, a location chosen partly for its proximity to skilled machinists, and partly because the city's own recent devastation had provided a certain motivating clarity about what was at stake. The core innovation was what the engineers called a tolerance trap. German naval engineering, like German engineering generally, operated to extraordinarily tight specifications. A valve bolt for a Type 7 U-boat ballast tank blow system was machined to a tolerance of plus or minus 0.02 millimetres, roughly a quarter of the width of a human hair. This precision was the source of the system's reliability. It was also its weakness. The British engineers produced bolts that were dimensionally identical to the originals, in every respect that could be verified by eye or by basic measurement. They were the correct length, they were the correct diameter, to within a fraction of a millimetre. They were manufactured from the correct grade of steel, with the correct thread pitch, and stamped with the correct production codes. A German dockyard inspector examining one of these bolts against a technical manual would find nothing wrong. But under the load conditions of a ballast tank pressurized to 12 atmospheres, roughly equivalent to the pressure you would experience standing beneath 120 meters of water, the bolt would either shear at a critical moment, seize in its housing, or, in the most sophisticated variants, cause the valve mechanism itself to jam in a partially open position that bled just enough air to prevent proper surfacing, whilst producing no immediately diagnosable fault. The manufacturing process required a workshop capable of producing components to aerospace-level tolerances, while simultaneously introducing controlled defects invisible to standard inspection. The bolts themselves weighed roughly 140 grams each, somewhat lighter than a cricket ball, and were approximately 7.5 centimeters in length. Batches of between 50 and 200 units were produced at a time, though the exact figures remain partially classified. The challenge was not making them look right. The challenge was making them fail at precisely the right moment, in precisely the right way, without leaving evidence that would alert German engineers to the nature of the problem. Getting the bolts into the German supply chain required a separate and equally elaborate operation. German U-boat bases along the French Atlantic coast, Brest, Lorient, Saint-Nazaire, La Pallice and Bordeaux, drew spare parts from a centralised supply network that extended back into Germany and occupied Europe. SOE networks operating in France, Belgium and the Netherlands had, by mid-1942, developed sufficient penetration of several industrial supply routes to enable the substitution of genuine German components with British-manufactured duplicates at various points in the distribution chain. The operation was not without its complications. Several batches of sabotaged components were intercepted by German security services, though the investigation that followed apparently concluded that the parts were simply defective manufacturing rather than deliberate sabotage, a conclusion the British engineers had worked hard to engineer into the failure modes themselves. Other batches were destroyed in Allied bombing raids on French port facilities before they could enter German service, which represented a paradox the programme's administrators found grimly amusing. Exact attribution is nearly impossible, and the programme's architects were fully aware that it would remain so. That was, in a sense, the point. If you cannot prove a bolt was sabotaged, rather than simply flawed, you cannot fix a system you do not know is broken. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. The Germans, for their part, were not ignorant of the general concept of industrial sabotage, and they pursued their own equivalent programs with considerable energy. The Abwehr ran several operations targeting British munitions manufacturing, most notably a series of attempts to introduce defective explosive compositions into RAF bomb production that were identified and neutralised by MI5 through the double cross system. German sabotage against American industrial facilities, particularly those producing aviation fuel additives, achieved some temporary disruption in 1942, though nothing approaching systemic effect. What the Germans never quite managed, and what the British programme exploited so effectively, was the use of precision engineering as a sabotage vector. German industrial sabotage tended toward the dramatic: explosives, arson, the introduction of abrasive compounds into machinery. These methods were detectable. They left evidence. They prompted immediate investigation. The tolerance trap approach left nothing except a component that, under analysis, appeared simply to have been manufactured to a slightly inferior standard. In a nation fighting a total war across 3 continents, manufacturing quality control was an accepted variable. Slightly substandard parts were an industrial reality, not an intelligence emergency. The Americans developed their own version of component sabotage through the OSS, though their programs tended to focus on land-based industrial infrastructure rather than naval systems. British liaison officers shared certain methodological principles with their American counterparts, though the specific technical details of the Bolt program were not, according to available records, transferred in full. The Japanese, facing similar Allied pressure on their own maritime supply chains, appear to have had no equivalent capability. What made the British approach distinctive was not any single technical innovation, but the combination of factors: precision manufacturing capability, access to enemy technical specifications through intelligence sources, an established covert supply chain through occupied Europe, and a willingness to play a long, patient, almost invisible game. Assessing the precise impact of the program is genuinely difficult, and any claim of certainty should be treated with appropriate skepticism. The 9 submarines referenced in the title of this documentary represent confirmed cases where mechanical failure, consistent with tolerance trap sabotage, was recorded in post-war analysis of German naval records. But attribution in intelligence history is rarely clean, and the actual number of vessels affected, across all classes and all failure modes, likely runs considerably higher. What the surviving records do suggest is that by the spring of 1943, German naval maintenance facilities were experiencing an anomalous rate of valve and fitting failure across several U-boat bases, a pattern that German engineers attributed to accelerating industrial degradation as wartime production pressures increased. They were not entirely wrong. Wartime production quality was declining across German industry, but the decline in the Atlantic U-boat fleet's operational availability in late 1942 and early 1943 was steeper than the general industrial trend would predict. Whether the difference represents the effect of the British sabotage program, other factors, or some combination, cannot be stated with certainty. History rarely offers the clean counterfactual. The psychological impact on German crews was, in some respects, more measurable. Captured U-boat officers interviewed by Royal Navy intelligence in 1943 and 1944 reported a pervasive anxiety about equipment reliability that went beyond the normal apprehensions of submarine service. Several described a suspicion, never confirmed, never formally articulated, that the boats were not simply wearing out, but that something was actively wrong with the supply chain. This suspicion, even unconfirmed, had a corrosive effect on operational confidence. The legacy of the program extends beyond the Second World War into the theory and practice of what would later be called supply chain interdiction. Cold War planning documents from both NATO and the Soviet bloc show evidence that military planners on both sides had studied the Atlantic sabotage operations carefully. The specific methodology of introducing controlled defects into precision components that appear standard under inspection but fail under operational stress, became a recognized category of covert industrial warfare. Surviving examples of the sabotaged components are held at the National Museum of the Royal Navy in Portsmouth, though they are not currently on public display. The German originals, for comparison, can be examined at the U-Boot Archive in Altenbruch, Germany. Placed side by side to the naked eye, they are indistinguishable. Return for a moment to that September night in 1942, to U-756. To 63 men in a steel cylinder 200 metres below the surface of the North Atlantic, listening to the silence of a machine that will not respond. The commander orders the blow valve activated again. Nothing. He orders it a third time. The mechanism engages partially, then sticks. A thin whistle of compressed air escapes into the bilges and is lost. The depth gauge does not move. The men look at the valve housing. They look at the bolt. It is the correct bolt. It is exactly the correct bolt. Every dimension is correct. Every marking is correct. It was installed 6 weeks ago by qualified German dockyard engineers following approved German naval procedures. There is nothing wrong with it. There is everything wrong with it. The boat eventually surfaces, not through the ballast system, but through an emergency procedure that takes 47 agonizing minutes and leaves the crew exhausted, the commander furious, and the boat temporarily non-operational. The maintenance report filed afterwards notes a valve fitting failure of unknown cause. Recommended action: replace the component from standard stock. Standard stock, of course, contains more of the same bolts. This is what British ingenuity looked like in the autumn of 1942. Not always Spitfires and Lancasters. Not always the crack of a Lee Enfield or the thunder of a 15-inch naval gun. Sometimes it looked like a workshop in Coventry, where men in overalls bent over lathes and micrometers, machining metal to a tolerance of 0.5 millimetre, engineering failure into the very precision that the enemy trusted most. Sometimes it looked like a supply clerk in occupied Lorient, palming a genuine bolt and replacing it with one that would, under the right conditions, transform a weapon of war into a steel coffin. The Germans built their submarines to last. They engineered them to extraordinary standards of precision and reliability. They trained their crews with meticulous rigour. They believed, not without reason, that industrial excellence was a form of military superiority. And they were right. It was. Right up until the moment that excellence became a vulnerability. Until the very fact that a German U-boat commander trusted his equipment was the thing that killed him. 6 million tons of Allied shipping went to the bottom of the Atlantic between 1939 and 1945. Tens of thousands of merchant sailors died in the cold water. The U-boat campaign came closer to strangling Britain into submission than most people alive today understand. The men who designed the tolerance trap program did not win the Battle of the Atlantic, but in the darkest months of 1942, they helped ensure that the battle could still be won, one 3-inch bolt at a time.